Hello YouTube. 50 years ago, in the month that I'm filming this, we first landed on the moon, and I am at the Neil Armstrong Air and Space Museum, and he first flew in a Gemini. There was 2 astronauts in there, and basically in this mock-up you get an idea of just how little space there was, and even less because there would have been controls. They have an actual one that was flown inside the museum. We're going to go take a look at that. And here's a mock-up of the Apollo command module, and 3 guys in that. So not a lot of privacy, a lot of equipment, but still pretty cool. So let's go into the museum and take a look around and see what we can find. So during the 60s, President Kennedy, in his inauguration speech, said we should go to the moon before the end of the decade. We did make it, with a few months to spare, but that guy back there, that could have been me. I avidly watched the space program, and when John Glenn circled the Earth, we listened to the radio as to where they were spotting them and did a grease pencil around the globe, and that track that was on that globe for years. Followed right up to and watching the moon landing. So to be here and visit stuff about some of my heroes, sort of special to me. Sort of cool. There's a certificate of membership for Neil Armstrong to the American Rocket Society. Neil joined the Navy and ended up being a fighter pilot during the Korean War, which is part of the reason a lot of the astronauts were military. And something I didn't know is that 13 women passed the medical screening between 1960 and 61. The idea was that maybe they would be better qualified to fly in space because they could fit in the cramped capsules better. And there's a list of those women. Peculiar about this one, whether or not she's a relation. But they could not get funding the remaining tests because NASA decided that the astronauts all had to be military jet test pilots. And back then, women could not meet those requirements. So this is the NASA 213 Skylancer. Neil Armstrong flew this plane many times, testing out abort procedures, and they eventually used it as a chase plane and retired it in 1970, and it came here in 1972. And let's take a look at quick look at the cockpit that's inside the museum. If you've seen the movie that depicts all the first 7 astronauts, we won't go into a lot of that, but they did change the age limit, lowered it to 35, raised the height limit to 6 feet, and in 62 they made it so that you didn't have to be a military test pilot to be an astronaut. And at that point, Neil had earned an aeronautical engineering degree from Purdue, and he was one of the ones selected for the second group of astronauts. And he was able to fly the X-15, which is a model up here. People of my age would really remember that, setting all kinds of speed and altitude records. And this is the mock-up of the cockpit of the F-5D Skylancer, which is another super fast plane that he flew. So what you're looking at is the actual Gemini 8 capsule that flew on March 16th, 1966. As you can see, there's a lot going on in there, and it's not very big. Now the heat shield has been removed, that's gone, and the door was taken off so that they could, for the display, but nobody knows where that door is. So if anybody's got a clue, let me know and I'll let them know. But they were scheduled to do 45 orbits and they only did 8. There was some sort of emergency with one of the thrusters malfunctioning, and they decided to cut the mission short. But they did accomplish one of their objectives, and that was to rendezvous and dock with another satellite, and that was in preparation for the Apollo missions to the moon, where they would have to take and just have the command capsule connect up with the lunar lander. So if you ever wondered what a spacesuit looked like for the Gemini missions, this was it. Because they weren't really exposed to the vacuum of space, there wasn't a concern about it blowing up and making it hard to move the joints. Here's one of the rocket engines for the giant Saturn rockets. So you wonder what real astronaut food looked like back in the Apollo and missions, Gemini missions. That's it. Basically squeeze bags with a tab you could open it up. Now we've already seen what the food looked like for the Gemini and Apollo astronauts, but when it came to the space shuttle, there was way ahead if they wanted Coca-Cola or Pepsi. It's specially designed cans with a propellant, and so that basically, to me, it's like having whipped cream, only it's Pepsi or Coke. And we're all familiar with freeze-dried ice cream. Well, here's some nuts and cheese pizza, dried stuff, chocolate pudding, scrambled eggs, applesauce, peas, corn. So it actually sort of looks like real food. Now what you're looking at here is a piece of the moon's crust. This was brought back by Apollo 11 astronauts, and you can't really tell how big it is until you see this is my hand compared to that rock. Robert Heinlein is one of my favorite authors. This is one of my favorite books, and I find it interesting that astronaut Janice Voss read that for relaxation during the shuttle mission in February 1995. Quite a difference between the spacesuit that we saw. So one of my pet peeves is when people say that NASA should be abolished. It's a waste of money. There are so many spin-offs that what we invested in the space program has more than paid for itself. Here's just a few examples. Is you've got your high heat paint, fire alarm or smoke alarms, the fireman's coats, the heat resistance, calculators, everything miniature. Imagine the tubes, but then they got down to transistors and get everything smaller. Of course, one of the weird things is this space pen, because regular ink pens don't write in space. So the Americans came up with this fancy thing, and the Russians use pencils. Quartz watches. Battery-powered tools. I mean, we all have those, and they are, the batteries getting more and more compact. Got anti-fogging compounds, graphite, mylar, like your space blankets, and the mylar balloons that are everywhere. Those are just some examples. You could get into medical field with the remote monitoring of patients. If you've ever been in the hospital, and the nurses can monitor you from their station. That is a big thing. So many things. The space program paid for itself in innovation over and over again. So there's a movie, it lasts about 20 minutes or so, but then when you come out, they've got additional displays, and you've got an actual shuttle lander here. And I'll see how this goes for me. If it's anything like my normal things with flight controls, I'm probably going to crash. Because that's pretty much what happens whenever I do this kind of stuff. Yep, that's my usual result, and that's why I don't fly. At the other end of the room, there's the lunar landing simulator. Let's see if I do better at this one. Let's go with no fear and watch me die. Yep, same result. I guess that's going to be the end of my tour here at the Armstrong Air and Space Museum. This is as close as I'll come to actually meeting Neil. He passed away 2002, I think. And always he was one of my heroes. All the astronauts are heroes of mine. So say goodbye to Neil, and let's get on the road and see what the next interesting place I can find. See you later, YouTube.